Miranda Hoover, and I'm the Education Coordinator for the NASA Oklahoma Space Grant Consortium. And today, I'm here at the Stafford Air and Space Museum. Isn't it an incredible place to be? And as you can see, there are planes all around me. Well, for the next 10 weeks, from 4 to 4:30, every single Thursday, we are going to be bringing you some incredible aerospace demonstrations from our NASA Oklahoma Space Grant Consortium STEM Engagement Center. And we're going to start with aviation. So what better way to start our STEM demonstration today than to be around all of these planes. Now, we're going to start you with the simplest of the concept, and we're going to work all the way up into aviation design. So you guys ready for our first demonstration? Why don't you come along and join me? For this first demonstration, we're going to learn about the properties of air, and specifically 4 properties of air. So to learn about the first property of air, you're going to need a plastic bottle. Any size will do. Mine's a smaller one, but a 2-liter bottle works well as well. And you're also going to need a balloon. Now, the very first thing that you're going to need to do is take the ball of the balloon and stick it into the bottle. Once the ball of the balloon is inside the bottle, then you are going to take the opening of the balloon and you're going to stretch it across the lip of the balloon. So it looks just like this. And so that you can blow air into this balloon. All right, now, we all have a task. So if you do this at home, you have the same exact task that I have. And my task is to blow up the balloon as big as I can inside this bottle. And maybe even blow it up so big that I burst the bottle. Who thinks I can do it? You think I can burst this bottle? Well, let's check it out. You guys ready? All right, here we go. That didn't work. Let's try it. Oh my goodness. Okay, one more time. Do you see how big my cheeks are getting? I am putting so much air into it that I look like a chipmunk, and it's still not working. Well, let's think about why this might be occurring. I know that there is air all around me. I can't see the air molecules, but they're there. And just like there's air all around me, there is air inside this bottle. So that when I try to blow up the balloon, it lets me put some air in the balloon, but it doesn't let me expand that balloon and take up the space of the air because the air is already there, and it goes, hey buddy, hey yellow balloon, you absolutely cannot get any bigger because there is no space for you to do that. And so we now know from this experiment that the first property of air is that air takes up space. Air takes up space. Now the next experiment that we're going to do, you're going to need a yardstick. This yardstick, just like I have, and then you're also going to need 2 balloons. You're going to blow up those balloons to where they're about the same size or have about the same amount of mass. Then you're going to take a string. You're going to cut 2 pieces of string about the same length. You're going to tie those pieces of string to your balloons, and then you're going to tape the ends of those strings, or you are going to tie them either way to the end of each of your yardstick. Now my finger is going to act as my fulcrum in this balance scenario, and my yardstick is going to act as my lever or my arm, by which is going to balance these 2 balloons. Now I'm going to get it about balanced. Where's balance is IKEA? Okay. There we go. Okay. It's not balanced right now. Let's try one more time. Okay, so now I'm going to take my straight pin and I am going to try to pop this balloon as best as I can and see what happens. So I'm going to release all the air or the mass out of this balloon. Oh my goodness, and what happened? Yeah, my arm or my lever, it fell to the left. On the right side is where I popped that balloon. And when I popped that balloon, it released all of the air out of it. But the left side still kept its balloon, which meant it still had the air inside it, and it had a greater amount of mass. So when that mass was greater on the left side, it flipped it over because I didn't have the mass any longer on the right side. So what we have just proved is that air has mass. So now we know that air takes up space and air has mass. Now let's look at the third property of air. And for that, I'm gonna need my handy dandy fan. And I'm just gonna stick my face in front. And you can see my hair blow, can't you? And I can feel the air. I can feel the air. So that's a third property. That was pretty simple, wasn't it? You can just go and stand in front of a fan and you can feel that air move. So we can feel the air. Now for the fourth property, for this next experiment, we are gonna need a container of water. My container is about half full. The next thing that I'm going to need is I am going to need a cup. Mine's just a regular plastic cup that we bought at the store. You could also use a glass cup. That will work just fine. Then I'm going to take this piece of napkin and I am going to crinkle it up. And when I do so, I'm going to put a piece of tape across it so it kind of stays like a ball. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to make one of those nice little circles of tape. And I'm going to stick it on the bottom of my napkin. Sorry for a minute, I forgot what it was called. I'm going to stick it on the bottom of my napkin. Then I'm going to flip it over upside down. Now, do you see how that stays in? Okay, now we're going to kind of do a magic trick and see what happens. So what do you think is going to happen to the napkin when we put it in the water? So I want you to turn to whoever's sitting by you and I want you to make your prediction or your guess of what's going to happen. What is going to happen to the napkin when I stick this cup in the water? All right, have you made your prediction? You did? Okay, let's see what happens. Ready? And we're going to take it down. All right, now it doesn't look like the water's in the cup, but how could I prove that? Wait a minute, I could take this cup out, and if my napkin is not wet, then that would prove that the water did not get into the cup. Right, guys, ready? Let's see what happens. Oh my goodness, my napkin is completely dry. How can that be? Well, see, it wasn't really magic that kept this napkin dry. What kept this napkin dry was that as we put that cup down into the water, there was air all inside this cup around that piece of napkin. And as that cup went into the water, that air that was inside the cup, it said, water, you cannot come in. It pushed against it, or it exerted pressure against the water. And it kept that water out of the cup. So we now know that air exerts pressure. That's our fourth property of air. Air exerts pressure. Now there's one more trick that I have up my sleeve, and I want to show you about the properties of air. And it's just going to be another one that illustrates or shows us further a better understanding of air exerts pressure. So for this, I'm going to use that cup I used earlier, and I'm going to use this jar. It's just a jar, like a canning jar. And I'm going to fill it full of water. So now my jar is completely full of water. The next thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to grab this handy dandy note card and I'm going to stick my note card, and I'm going to make sure that I did not, I think I may have dumped a little bit of water out while I was grabbing the note card. And I'm going to grab a dry note card and I'm going to stick it over top. Now holding this just like so, I'm going to flip this over. And now I'm gonna let go. Oh my goodness. Now how many of you thought that the water was gonna come out and the note card was gonna fall down? Well, it didn't, did it? And why is that? Well, what happened was once I pulled it over and got it stable, air was exerting pressure because there's air all around us, and it's exerting pressure on that note card, and that note card being pushed up against that jar is keeping the water inside my jar. How cool is that? So we now know that air exerts pressure. But I also want to take this one more step and just explain something, because if you keep this turned over long enough, eventually what's going to happen is your piece of paper is going to get saturated with water. And when that happens, it is going to fall and the water is going to fall out. Now that's not because of air pressure, but that's because you saturated that card where it can no longer stand stiff. So as long as you've got a nice stiff note card and you get it turned over, that air is going to exert pressure upon that note card and keep the water in your jar. Now you can tell everyone else it's magic, but now you know the science behind it. So now that you know 4 properties of air, the most important, taking us into the next lesson, is going to be that air exerts pressure. So let's say that one time with me. Air exerts pressure. Excellent job. Okay, well, let's see what's in store for us next. Now that we have an understanding of 4 of the properties of air, we can now take that final property we learned about, air exerts pressure, and begin to understand it in a new way with our Benoulli Stations. So let's go check that out. Come with me. For this next demonstration, we are going to be conducting 6 different experiments called Benoulli Stations. And if you remember from our last demonstration, I said one of the most important properties of air that we learned was that air exerts pressure. Now this concept is going to be very important to understand going into these Benoulli stations to help us understand what is occurring. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing that you'll need to do is to find 2 balloons. You'll need to blow them up so they're about the same size. Then you're going to tie 2 pieces of string, one to each of those balloons. And it doesn't matter how long those strings are, because you're going to be able to hold them at the same height. So here in just a minute, I'm going to hold them at the same height. I'm going to put them a little bit closer together, and then I'm going to blow in between them. What do you think is going to happen when I blow in between those balloons? Do you have your guess or your prediction of what is going to happen? So find someone or something in the room to tell what your prediction is, or what your guess is of what will happen. All right, are you guys ready? I'm going to gently blow in between and let's see what occurs. What happened? Did they go apart? No, they came together. Were you surprised by that? That's pretty surprising, isn't it? Well, what you discovered is what Daniel Benoulli in the early 1700s also discovered. Actually, in 1738, he published a work called Hydrodynamica, and it was all about his study of fluids. Now, fluids can be liquids like water. They can also be gases like air. And the reason that gases and liquids are both fluids is because they flow and they take up on the shape of the container of which they are in. So that's what makes them fluids. And what he discovered specifically about fluids is that when the fluid moves faster, it creates less pressure. And when a fluid moves slower, it creates greater pressure. So in this experiment, we were blowing the faster air between these 2 balloons. And when we blew that faster or higher velocity air between the balloons, it created less pressure. But the air on the outside of the balloons, it was not moving faster, so it created greater pressure. And that greater pressure pushed those 2 balloons together. So that is our first experiment, which has illuminated Bernoulli's principle. The second experiment that we're going to do today, and I'm going to go ahead and let that fall to the ground, we're going to do what's called the paper bridge. And I'm going to take 2 books. I'm actually going to put their spines where they're facing each other. And I'm going to take a piece of paper. Any old piece of paper will do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow underneath this piece of paper. And I want you to make your prediction or your guess again. Tell whoever or whatever in the room, what do you think is going to happen? All right. You told someone or something? Excellent. Let's see what happens. Let's see if your prediction is correct. Was your prediction correct? Were you correct in what you thought would happen when I blew faster air below the paper underneath my paper bridge? Well, you guys saw what happened. That piece of paper went down. And why is that? Well, as we just discovered with those balloons, it's all about Bernoulli's principle. So, when we blew faster air below the bridge, that created lower pressure. But when we did not blow faster air, so the air was slower, above the paper, that caused greater pressure, and that greater pressure pushed on that piece of paper, and it caused our bridge to collapse. So again, there's Bernoulli's principle in action. Okay, so the next one that we're gonna do is called our ping pong ball cup challenge. I have two cups, and they're about the same size. And these ones are plastic. They can be glass, it doesn't really matter. You just want them to be about the same size. The next thing that you're gonna need to do is grab a ping pong ball, my trusty ping pong ball, and I'm going to put the ping pong ball in one cup, and I'm going to hold both cups with my hands, but without using my hand, I am going to make my ping pong ball go into this cup, or at least attempt to do that. So let's see if I can do that. Are you guys ready? Okay. Oh my goodness, I did it the first time, didn't I? So how did that happen? Well, guys, I actually know just a little trick to this challenge, and that helps me every single time to win this challenge. What the trick is, if you blow across the top of the cup, you are creating lower pressure above the top of that ball. But that means there's greater pressure with the slow air below the ball, which causes that ball to pop out, and it was able to land in this other cup. So it was the same idea, that faster air across created lower pressure. The slower air below created greater pressure, and it popped it out. That's a pretty cool trick, isn't it? Now, if I try to blow straight down into it, it doesn't work. I have to blow it across the top of that ball. And it is a little tricky, and you do have to get kind of good out of it. So I challenge you to try this at home and see if you can show your friends and family Bernoulli's principle in action. This next one is our straws and cans. So for this one, I'm gonna put my cans I'm gonna put my straws, and these are just non-bendy straws that all have the wrapper taken off of them. And I'm gonna put them about a centimeter apart. Now you can tell they're not exact, and that is okay. Now the next thing that you're gonna do, you can either take a straw, or you can just blow in between, either way. But whether you're blowing with a straw or blowing with your mouth, you're gonna gently blow between these two cans, and we're gonna see what happens. Now it's very important you blow directly in between. So, I forgot to tell you to make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen when I blow between these two cans? All right, did you make your prediction and guess? All right, now tell someone or something in the room. Did you get that done? All right, let's see if your prediction or guess is correct. Are you guys ready? And here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. Now, when I got that blown directly in between those two cans, they came together, didn't they? They were kind of attracted to each other and came together. Why is that? Well, it's the exact same thing that happened with the balloons. So we blew faster air in between the cans, or higher velocity air in between the cans. That created lower pressure, just like Bernoulli's principle tells us, right? And on the outside of those cans, it was slower velocity air, or slower air, and that created greater pressure, which pushed those two cans together. Excellent. You guys are really getting the hang of Bernoulli's principle. So awesome. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to do what is called Hoverbomb. Now for this, I am actually going to need a straw, so give me 2 seconds because I don't know what happened to my bendy straw. All right. So once you have your bendy straw, mine fell on the floor and I didn't even notice. Okay, so now that I have my bendy straw and I have a ping pong ball, and I took my bendy straw and made it make a little L or a little chair or however you want to call that. And now I'm going to try to keep my ball up in the air while blowing air out of my straw. Do you think I can do that? Let's see what happens. I did it, didn't I? Now, as soon as my air slowed down and I was losing air pressure, it stopped happening. But while I was blowing that air across the bottom of my ball, I was creating lower air pressure below my ball. Now, I wasn't blowing faster air above my ball, it was slower air, and that was creating greater pressure. However, I was still blowing the balloon up. So what happened was my ball was kind of trapped in the air between that faster moving air that was lower pressure and the slower moving air above it, which was greater pressure. And it was just trapped in between. So again, Bernoulli's principle in action. All right, so let's see what happens when I try this with a funnel. So I have just any old funnel. Now make sure you have permission from mom or dad or whoever's in the house before you just go grab the funnel, and make sure you wash it after you do this. You want to run it through the dishwasher to sanitize it, just like you'd wash your hands before you touch something else. And you're going to take a ping pong ball, so you can use the same ping pong ball that you've used for our other ping pong ball experiments, and you're going to stick this ping pong ball inside the funnel, and then you're going to blow just like so. Now, I'm going to try to get in a position where you can see on camera what is happening. So you're going to kind of have to look, because I've got, unfortunately, a white funnel with a white ball. But let's see what happens. Yeah, my ball stays in, doesn't it? But it spins continually. Well, what happens, again, is my ball's kind of getting trapped between that faster air, which has lower pressure, and the slower, that's below, and the slower air that's above, that's greater pressure. And so it's trapping it in between. So even though my faster air is blowing that ball kind of up, but it's still lower pressure. So that air that is slower above is pushing down on it. And again, trapping it in there, which is why it's just spinning continually in that funnel. Oh my goodness, another example of Bernoulli's principle. Well, I can tell you, this is not the last time you're going to hear Bernoulli's principle with these demonstrations that we're doing with you. So, I hope you enjoyed getting to understand better what Bernoulli's principle was and how it relates to air exerts pressure, right? Because we said air exerts pressure, now we had to look at what happens when, what creates lower pressure and what creates higher pressure. And we learned that the faster the air is moving, the lower the air pressure. And the slower air creates greater air pressure. And that's why each of these experiments worked. Okay, so let's review what we just learned.
We hope you had as much fun learning today with us as we had with you. And we hope you enjoyed each of our demonstrations. Now, as I said at the beginning of the segment, we're starting with the simplest of the concept, and then we're going to work our way into the more complicated end, all the way into aviation design and how we build an airplane. But we have to start off with these first concepts and understand air and Bernoulli's principle before we can even begin to move on to the other parts. So we're going to be doing aviation with you for about 4 to 5 weeks. And then for 5 to 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at space exploration. But next week, we're going to be coming to you, if all plans go right, from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. That's right. That's where Orville and Wilbur Wright had their very first flight. Oh my goodness. And, I had to be in front of a replica of their flyer to give you that news. So I look forward to all the great things that we're going to be doing in Kitty Hawk and showing you, as well as combining that with some more fantastic demonstrations. And don't forget, a lot of the demonstrations that we're going to be doing with you are with items that you can find in your household, and then you can be the scientist, the researcher, or the engineer, and complete these experiments at your own home. So until I see you next Thursday at 4 o'clock, have a fantastic rest of your week and a fantastic weekend.